Hello everyone! In this lesson, we will complete our open registration and also learn how to customize the look and feel and branding of the login screen. Without further ado, let's get started. Alright, now before we learn how to customize the login screen, let's first cover something that we probably should have addressed in our previous lesson. So if you view the website in a new private or incognito window where you are not logged in, you'll notice that our login button doesn't do anything. So for our first task in this lesson, let's go update the href value for the login button. So over in our text editor, let's jump into header.php, and down towards the very bottom, the first link we see within our else block is the login link. So let's just go ahead and update its href value. Instead of a hashtag, let's say PHP, and we can just echo out the results of a WordPress function named WP login URL. And while we're at it, we can also clean up the URL for the sign up link. I know we just wrote this in the previous lesson, and this will get the job done, but instead of us manually pointing at a specific location, instead within this PHP block, we can just echo out a WordPress function named WP registration URL. And WordPress will take care of pointing towards the precisely correct location. Alright, so we just updated the href for sign up and log in. Let's go ahead and save that. And now we can actually use this login button. Cool. Now let's change gears and learn how to customize this login screen. The first thing that almost everyone wants to customize or change is the WordPress logo here. You probably don't want to advertise for WordPress. Instead, you want your company logo or at least text of your company name here. Now, in just a few minutes from now, we will indeed learn how to remove this WordPress image. But first, let's address the link value of this object. So at the moment, if you hover over it, you can see down in the bottom left corner of my browser that it wants to take me to wordpress.org. So if I click on this logo, it takes us to the official WordPress website. Now, obviously, that's not what we want. We want our website to feel unique and one of a kind. So instead, let's modify things so that if you click on this, it takes you to the home page of our website. So let me show you how to do that. Over in our text editor, let's jump into functions.php, and just to stay organized, let's scroll down to the very bottom and add a new comment. Customize login screen. Okay, and what we want to do is add a filter, and this is a WordPress function that takes two arguments. The first argument is the value or object that you want to customize or filter or change in some way. In this case, the name of the WordPress filter hook that we're looking for is login_header URL, and then the second argument is just a function that returns whatever you want to use instead. So we can make up whatever name we want for a function. Let's say our header URL, and then down on a new line, let's create a function with that exact name. Our header URL, parentheses, curly brackets, and then we simply return, and then you could manually type out a URL that you want to link to, but instead, why don't we just return the results of a WordPress function named site URL, and just point towards the home page or slash. And just to keep things extra secure, why don't we escape this URL? So wrap it in escape URL, add the matching closing parentheses here. Okay, now if we save that, now if I try to click on this header or logo here, cool, it takes us to our home page instead of the official wordpress.org. Okay, let's move on to our next change. At this point, you might be asking yourself, Brad, why would you bother showing us how to change this URL when we don't even want this WordPress image here at all? Well, that's a good question, but in reality, this is not an image file here. So if I right-click on the logo and choose Inspect, we can see that that A or link element does not contain an inline image element. Instead, WordPress uses a CSS background image to display the WordPress logo. So if you instead want to display your company logo or just plain text there, all you would need to do is write a bit of CSS that targets the A element that lives within a heading level 1 within the div with an ID of login. And right over here, you can see that exact selector that the official WordPress code is using. Now again, this is not a course on CSS, so we're not going to write the CSS by hand, but what I do want to show you is how to load your own CSS on this login page in the first place, because that can be a bit tricky. So by default, WordPress is not going to load your theme's CSS file on this login screen. But it's very easy for us to tell WordPress to please start doing that. Let me show you how to do that. So over in our text editor, still within functions.php, let's add a new line down at the bottom, and let's say add action. And for the first argument, the WordPress event that we want to hook onto is login on queue. I have the hardest time spelling that word correctly. I always think I'm spelling it wrong even if I'm spelling it correctly. So I think that's right. Anyways, login on queue scripts. And then for the second argument, we just make up a function name. Why don't we call it our login CSS? Okay, then let's create a function with that exact name. So function our login CSS. Okay, and now within the body of this function, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. Towards the very beginning of the course, we already wrote PHP to tell WordPress to load our theme folder's CSS file. So if we just scroll up within functions.php, for me it's around line 43. It might be similar for you, but I want you to look for our function that we named University Files. Remember, this is where we used functions like WP onQueueScript to load JavaScript and WP onQueueStyle to load CSS. And this line in particular will load our theme folder's main style sheet. Now in this context, where this line of code currently lives, it's only going to load our CSS on the front end of our website, which does not include WordPress login or registration pages. So let's just copy this line into our clipboard and then down towards the very bottom. Within this brand new function that we just created a moment ago, we can just paste in our clipboard. And now if I save that, you might need to refresh your login screen, but you can see it just received a new fresh coat of paint. So whatever it is that you want to customize, whether it's the background color, the foreground color, the text or button color, or anything really, even the padding or the font size or the font family, the overall width of this box, whatever it is that you want to customize, all you need to do is write CSS in your main theme folder's style sheet that overrides the default WordPress styling. So basically, whatever you want to customize, just right-click on it, choose Inspect, and then with that element selected, over on the right-hand side, you can scroll down and find the WordPress styling. So for example, these are the default blue colors that WordPress would have used for the login button. And now all you need to do is write CSS that overrides this default selector that WordPress is using. Now again, this is not a course on CSS, but I will point you in the right direction if you want to start making your own stylistic changes. If you're looking for an idea of how to get started, just jump into your text editor, and within your theme folder, look in the CSS directory, and then modules, and then open up the file named login.css. And here you can see an example of the selectors I'm using in order to override the WordPress defaults and create my own styling here. Okay, now changing gears, a tiny detail that I'm noticing is that the screen is not using my custom font that I'm using on the front end. The reason for this is because we are indeed loading custom Google fonts for the front end, And if we want to use those on the login screen as well, we need to explicitly tell WordPress that. So to do this, let's jump back into our functions.php file. And instead of manually typing out a new line of code within this new function of ours, we can just scroll back up to around line 43 or so. And within our University Files function, let's just copy and paste this custom Google Fonts line, right? So it begins with onCue style. So just copy that line into my clipboard, scroll back down. Within our brand new function, just add a new line, paste it in, save that. And it's super subtle, but my headline is now using my custom font. Okay, now before we bring this lesson to a close, there's one more thing I want to cover. At the moment, if I hover over the header and just pause for a second or two, you can see this little pop-up title message that says powered by WordPress. Now I know that's a really small detail, but hey, you might want to customize it, and you might want your website to feel unique and not really mention the phrase WordPress. So let me show you how to change that. Back in functions.php, let's add a new line, and let's say add filter. The name of the filter hook that I'm interested in is login_header title. And then for the second argument, let's just make up a name for a function. Maybe our login title. And then let's create a function with that exact name. And then we just return a value of whatever we want. So we could say quotes and then just spell something out. And that works well for a one-off, unique website. But if instead you're building a theme that might be used by a lot of different sites, in that case, what you want to do is fetch the official site name from the database. So let's just return get blog info, and within the parentheses, the bit of info that we're looking for is name. Okay, so if I save that, and now if I hover over the header here, cool, instead of powered by WordPress, we see the actual name of our site. And that's going to bring this lesson to a close. At this point, now that we've created our own custom login and logout functionality, and now that we know a little bit about WordPress roles and permissions, we are now in the perfect position to start giving our random stranger subscriber accounts a few fun interactive abilities. So, in the next lesson, we are going to work on giving subscribers the ability to take notes while they're in class. Right from the front end of our website, they will be able to create or save a note, as well as edit and update or even delete their private notes. This should be a really fun exercise for learning how to work with user-specific content. So let's keep things rolling, and I will see you then.